Lily did not moan loudly, and grimaced. She was in pain on the right side of her head. Unbearable pain forced the woman to wake up. Slowly, as if escaping from a viscous resin, feelings returned to her. First came the sounds, strange splashing, rustling and birdsong. It took a little time for the brain to correctly determine what these sounds were. Then came the smell of grass and something fresh behind it, a feeling of cold. The body lay on a strange surface. Lily seemed to be soft, but completely uncomfortable, and in her head, there was nothing else but. Separate images flashed, but they did not want to turn into connected thoughts. The woman opened her eyes and immediately winced at the bright light. Multicolored bright spots and circles flew around. For several minutes, Lily tried to discern in the colored machine before her eyes that it was understandable, and then she left this matter and continued to lie with half-closed eyes and freeze more and more. Gradually thoughts began to appear uncomfortable. You need to move coldly, you need to move. Consciousness returned reluctantly, thoughts wove like lazy snails, my head split, causing not the most pleasant disturbances in the stomach, my hands barely raised. Lily could not move her fingers normally. The woman twitched and rolled over abruptly on her side, throwing her to the ground. Oddly enough, it helped to start the body. Hands with legs began to obey before my eyes, it cleared up, even her head turned out to be, it began to hurt less. Lily raised herself on her hands and looked around. She was sitting on the grass at the very edge of the river, her legs slid into the water, from which an unpleasant cold crawled through her body. The woman looked at herself, her clothes were wet and dirty, as if she was rolling along the shore. Or maybe she really did. She opened her eyes wide and stared in front of her, what she was doing here and where it was. Panic came over sharply, she caught her breath and even pushed the pain into the background. Lily convulsively tried to remember the latest events, came out frankly bad. It seems that she was sitting in a car with her husband and a friend blinked, and opened her eyes and already there. This memory helped to quell the panic. The woman took a deep breath, remembered her name, that she has a husband at home, friends, this is already something. Baby, you wouldn't sit in the water, you'll catch a cold, I heard it very close. Lily threw up her head and immediately grimaced in pain, she blinked, dispersing the colored circles before her eyes, and stared at the hunched old woman. She stood with a basket full of some herbs and examined the woman with curiosity. Are you all right, honey? Grandma asked. Lilia opened her mouth to reassure her that she was fine, but suddenly realized that she was sitting in an unknown place and had no idea how she got here. Instead of words, a sob burst out of her mouth. She unexpectedly burst into tears for herself. Well, that's what, baby, the old woman said, getting up and come with me, it's not far. I'll give you tea to drink, I'll give you dry clothes, then you'll tell everything. Lily obediently got up and immediately sneezed deafeningly. Apparently, she lay in wet clothes in the wind for quite a long time and got sick. His nose itched sharply, his throat tickled disgustingly. The grandmother pulled her sleeve somewhere along the river bank, the woman followed the unexpectedly nimble and old woman. On the way, Lily looked around, trying to understand where she was, but the landscape was completely unfamiliar. There was a road nearby, from where the noise of cars was periodically heard. Tall trees and dense bushes grew between the highway and the river, and on the other side of the stream there was a wide meadow. Granny deftly moved her legs, easily bending branches and thickets. Lily constantly ran into the stumps and clung to the bushes with her sleeves and hair, and even managed to climb into the stinging nettles. Hissing in pain and spitting from an unnoticed web, she missed the moment when she and the old woman went to a shaky bridge, crossed the river, dived into a ravine invisible from the side and ended up near a rickety house. The old woman opened the creaking door and beckoned Lily to follow her, and contrary to appearance, the inside of the building turned out to be cozy. Sheaves were drying under the ceiling, and there was a clean, albeit old, tablecloth on the table. "Let's get changed." While Lily was looking around, the old woman dived somewhere to bake, and brought an old-fashioned blouse and skirt. "This is mine, I wore it in my youth, do not be afraid of everything clean." Wet dirty clothes unpleasantly stuck to the body, so the woman hurried to change them to dry ones. The old woman showed a basin of water, where Lily washed her face and hands. While the guest was putting herself in order, the hostess kindled a fire in the stove and heated the kettle. On the table immediately, as if by magic, appeared bread jam and fresh berries in a bowl. The old woman made tea from herbs that were dried around and invited the guest to the table. "Do you live here?" Lily asked, fascinated, looking around. "No," the granny chuckled, "sometimes I spend the night on dry grass, but I live in the village, behind the woods." "How did you end up here?" Lily strained her memory, but she didn't remember anything. The last thing that was recorded in her mind was this trip in the car. She and her husband and girlfriend went to a neighboring city for a walk. They returned home at dusk, and then Lily had already come to her senses near the river. And even in childhood, the woman was given a disappointing diagnosis of epilepsy. The older she got, the rarer the attacks, the last one lasting less than a minute and more than 3 years ago. Lily even thought that she was able to overcome her illness. But, apparently, this was not the case. The old woman listened attentively to her, nodded her head and offered to sleep. "Yes, I need to go home." Lilia shook her head, slowly flapping her eyes that were stuck together. "Sleep for a couple of hours and go," Grandma told her. "I'll hang your things to dry in the sun. During this time, nothing will happen, you will always have time to go home." The woman promised herself that she would only lie down for a couple of minutes, but as soon as her head touched the pillow, she immediately fell asleep soundly. Granny hung out the guests' belongings on a bush near the entrance and quietly closed the door and hurriedly walked along the barely noticeable path to her home. There she found a district police officer and asked if anyone had filed a missing woman's report. The old woman was very stubborn in her inquiries, so the district police officer even called the nearest cities, but no one disappeared anywhere. "Efimovna, if you know anything, then tell me," the district policeman warily asked. "What can a headless grandmother know? My son dreamed, forgive the old one." Granny repented. She hurriedly went home, collected food and returned to the rickety shack. The strange guest was still sleeping. Grandma cooked dinner and put a bowl of freshly made soup on the table. The delicious smell woke Lily. She got up and immediately sneezed. She caught a cold, shook her head. "Granny. Now I'll brew herbs as soon as I can remove them by hand. I need to go home." The woman tried to object. She felt terrible, sneezed all the time and wanted to sleep. The old woman would not let her guest go. "Today you will spend the night here, drink herbs, and tomorrow you will go where you need to." "But my husband probably lost me," the woman tried to argue. "Nobody is looking for you," I asked the district police officer. My grandmother brushed it off. "Sleep." And she really fell asleep, and the old woman settled down from behind the table and diligently tied the freshly picked herbs into bunches to hang to dry. In the evening, when Lily woke up again, Grandma asked the guest to tell about herself. The woman did not consider herself an interesting character, but she fulfilled the request of the hostess. She told how all her life she was afraid that no one would be needed with her sore. Her parents cherished and cherished her, but the girl had no friends for a long time. And who wants to play with an eccentric, which at any moment can fall to the floor and convulse? When the new Lily was transferred to their class, she didn't even try to make friends with her, but Angela was suddenly not afraid of a seizure. She called the adults, and then brought her homework home. Since then, Lily has a girlfriend. The girls went to the same university. Then Angela did not manage to score points for the budget, and Liline's father raised all his connections so that his daughter would not be left alone again. Then there were joint parties with classmates. At one of them the girl met her future husband Evgenia. Also, surprisingly, he accepted the illness of the chosen one. They met before graduating from university, and then got married. The parents were delighted with the son-in-law and immediately transferred the family business under his management. The household appliances store Lilia and Yevgeny decided not to have children. They did not want the woman's disease to be inherited. The couple had a wonderful life. We often went on trips, went to restaurants, and in order not to be bored, they took Angela with them. A friend's personal life was not going well, so she happily joined the company. And now they all went together to a neighboring city to open a museum. The guest laid out all this to the silent and hospitable hostess. The old woman nodded, and then she said something absolutely strange. "Baby, do as I say now, hide your hair under a scarf, put that sweater on top of my clothes, none, hood come closer to the house, but don't show that it's you. Just stop and listen." Why, Lily was dumbfounded. "Just do it, and then you will understand," said the old woman. The woman was puzzled by a strange request. After everything that the grandmother did for her, she simply had to thank her. Even in such a strange way. The next morning she wrapped herself with a scarf, pulled on a stretched oversized jacket and went to the house. The old woman gave money for a bus to the city, but from the bus station to the house and Lilia walked on her feet. Weakness still made itself felt. When she stepped out onto her street, her breath hitched, her shoulders stooped, and her legs barely moved. From the outside, it was impossible to recognize her. Lily went into the yard and got tired, sat down on a bench under the house. There was no one around, but voices could be heard from behind the open windows. The woman frowned. One definitely belonged to her husband, and the other looked like Angela. But what could a friend need in the middle of the day at their house? Lily crept up quietly, pulled out the keys, and carefully turned the lock. The door opened inaudibly. The woman quietly crept along the corridor and stopped near the living room. There, in raised tones, an amusing dialogue took place. "It's been more than a day and nothing." Angela was indignant. Someone should have found her by now. What if she survived? "Calm down," came the voice of Eugene. "There is simply no one in those places. They will find it today, or I will have to file a missing person report as an inconsolable husband. She could not survive. You yourself saw the attack perfectly, fell into the river, drowned. It was necessary to make sure." With annoyance, his friend hissed. "Weren't you in a hurry to hide yourself?" Eugene chuckled. "There was another car there. I didn't want to be noticed," Angela justified herself. "Calm down. She couldn't survive. Everything will be fine, as you and I planned. We will arrange a magnificent funeral. We will wait for 6 months, then we will move in, and the store will not be taken away." My friend doubted. "They will be in mourning from the death of their daughter. They will not have time for stores. And we re-registered the apartment for me a few weeks ago." What happened next? Lily did not listen. She ran out into the street, completely unconcerned about the door left open. She herself did not understand how it turned out to be near her parents' house. Mom and Dad didn't recognize their daughter at first, and then they calmed her down for a long time. Finally, she was able to gather her strength, told about what happened to her and about the conversation she heard. Parents gave their daughter a sedative and quickly took matters into their own hands. The following days merged with Lily into one hodgepodge. From meetings with various police lawyers, signing some papers. She was so crushed by the betrayal of the two closest people, she didn't really delve into what was happening around. Later, Dad sat her on the sofa and said that divorce papers had been filed, and a criminal case had been opened against Yevgeny and Angela. The man went into denial, and very plausibly explained the absence of his wife. Lawyers settled on Angela, and she broke down. She told about far-reaching plans, complained about Lily's luck. It turned out that a friend had long envied her, because she had everything. Husband, home, parents' business. Lilia was so shocked by the events that she did not know what to do with herself. She asked her parents to take her to that very river, walked across the familiar rickety bridge and opened the creaky door. The old woman was sitting at the table, diligently bandaging bunches of herbs. Noticing the guest, the hostess handed her a spool of thread. Lily sat down on a nearby bench and began to wind several stems together. "Everything will be fine," the old woman said. And Lily believed her. "Everything will be fine, but for now you cannot think about anything and dry the herbs.